I would like to invite up Vladis Koshenko, and we're going to be talking about From Listening to Leverage, why voice of customer must drive action, not just measurement. Come on up. Welcome.
Thank you, Sean.
We had a great dinner last night, and I know you're enjoying the conference so far as well. So, but why don't you introduce yourself a little further to the audience here and your work at AstraZeneca?
Absolutely. I'm that guy with a complicated name, Vladislav. Vladis for short. I am Director of Customer Experience for Global Medical Affairs at AstraZeneca, Oncology Business Unit, equally complicated title. But quite frankly, I've been in pharmaceutical industry for a little bit over half a decade. Majority of my experience comes from consulting in financial services, in automotive, and in retail. But the through line has always been, how do we take what customer says and turn into what organization does? And with that, historically, CX has always been embedded in two stages of voice of customer cycle. One being collecting the insights and then monitoring insights. Sean, that reminds me of something that you said earlier in your opening remarks, which I liked a lot, where you said that if we just talk about it and do nothing, like nothing happens. So that's why my job is to make sure that we embed ourselves as CX in the other two stages as well, where we interpret insights and then we improve based on insights as well.
Because you specifically said, as we were kind of preparing for this idea, this switch, because you said specifically, VOC is a change system, not a measurement system. Pull on that thread a little bit, because I think it is very important distinction there.
Yeah, absolutely. It's, well, the best way to put that is scorecards, right? Like scorecards that tell you what happened. That's not where we want to be at. The change systems, that's what makes sure that somebody does something. I had a really good example of that happening just recently at AZ with Global Medical Affairs. We have a function called Medical Communications or SciComms, Scientific Communications. And one thing that they focus on is development of programs and assets that then go to local markets, to our field teams, to our local medical affairs, so that they can use these assets to develop engagements with healthcare professionals, HCPs, as we call them. So there were two teams across 6 therapeutic areas that we have. In one therapeutic area, what they did, they took our insights and they just ran solo with them. They did not engage us through all of the stages of developing the asset. Then they released it. We came in, we measured the impact, and the NPS on that particular asset was 15 points above the baseline, on the score from +100 to -100 to +100 as NPS goes. 15 points. And then almost at the same time, in the different therapeutic area, we had another team that didn't just take our insights, they embedded CX all the way through. So we were there for the interpreting of those insights. We were there working with UX, with content writers, with development, with nominal signatory, with compliance, all the way through. And then when we pulled the results, compare that against the baseline, 75 points against the baseline. This 5 times delta is what makes difference between voice of customer being just a reporting system versus something that enables change.
So just out of curiosity, did that happen naturally? Were you doing an A/B test, or did that just happen?
It just happened naturally,
Okay.
and quite frankly, I was happy that they said no because I'm like, I need a case, right? Because if I'm just saying like, oh, this is 50 base points, this is 75 base points, that becomes standard operating procedure. It's like, oh, that's what would have happened anyways. Now I have a point saying, no, this is what's happening when you do absolutely nothing when it comes to CX integration into the entirety of the VOC.
Yeah. And a hint to the audience, that's not a bad way to think of it. Always is to think about it as an opportunity, because otherwise, if that hadn't happened, you wouldn't have that. So think about that a little bit. Sometimes it is about a little bit testing against, inclusion, exclusion, and being able to do that
Absolutely.
effectively. So again, you mentioned scoreboards, you mentioned dashboards. There's NPS, there's CSAT, there's CES, there's trust, there's all these different metrics that are out there. But we were talking a little bit about the word sentiment and how different that is. And ultimately, I know I've, in some of the consulting I do, they're like, oh, we want to measure sentiment. And then, I start digging in, like, what does that mean? And then they don't know what it means. But what's your thought when you think about measuring sentiment, not just metrics?
Well, you know what? I'll give you another example. Just when I started at AZ, one of the first things that we did, we established the baseline. And with that one, it was just a global survey that went to all our field teams, to our medical excellence teams in all of the regions. So the entire task force was about 800 people. We got responses from like over 54%, so very tangible. And we focused on 3 key metrics. One of them was NPS, Net Promoter Score, for their satisfaction with our program, satisfaction with the content that we're delivering. Another one was customer effort score when it came to discoverability and accessibility of those assets. And the third one was CSAT, customer satisfaction with communications around what is being delivered, what are the new changes so that people are in the loop. And then when we looked at customer effort score, at that time it was 67%. And what was pulling through is this overwhelming feedback on how it's just too complex, right? We have I think we have about 6 hereditary platforms where functions on the global side post their content, where they upload their assets. We had, I think, 9 different channels through which we communicated all of those changes. And in some cases, some of the medical science liaisons, like your kind of Salesforce equivalent pre-med, pre-launch, they were just getting overwhelmed. Right? They didn't know, like, even if they knew where the asset was, even if they knew which platform it was sitting at, they often couldn't find it. And sometimes they didn't even have access to some of those platforms, so there was a bottleneck of laddering up to the manager, waiting until they get to share that. So we got that, and regrettably, we did nothing about this feedback where they were saying we need one-stop shop, right? Next year, we reestablished the baseline, and that's my approach, to not just look at how things evolve over the years, but reestablish where the baseline is at now so that we can measure adequately. And it dropped from 67% to 53%. And there were no new pain points introduced, no new stressors. It was that same feedback. We need one-stop shop. At that point, it was writing on a wall, so we did something about it. And it was a platform that we launched that's, we call it Medical Confidence Toolkit, that's enabled them to just go to one place and know that from all of the global functions, all of the relevant and most recent content and assets, they're all there. What was interesting is that by launching it in one therapeutic area, because we did it as a pilot, we saw a jump all the way down from 53 to 80%. Right? But what was truly revelatory, I would say, is the fact that it wasn't just us putting that initiative out there. It was us closing the loop, right? And that was the big part of it. So like where we went back to all of the detractors, we went back to all of the passives, and we said, yeah, we heard you. Like we heard what you said. This is how we're addressing it, and this is how we're going to scale it and move forward in future, so that that pain point is fully addressed.
And you basically made it a governance requirement.
It was not a preference anymore. It was governance, in fact. And one thing that I would mention is you have to follow that format. You said, we did, we are monitoring, we are measuring, and we're evaluating. With the caveat, though, until you get that implemented, do not go back to your detractors, do not go back to your passives and re-engage them, because you will get exactly that thing. You will see that feedback loop debt, like as we call it, where you're gonna see deterioration of score. Because what that tells them is, yeah, you are collecting, like, you're listening and you're doing nothing, right? Like, it's not important enough for you. They're less inclined to then share feedback because it's not being addressed. And they're less inclined to give you a good score that you can then bring to your boss.
Yeah, and I was just working with a company recently, and they got some, through work we were doing, they got some really kind of critical feedback from their customers about problems, and the term was used, if your product wasn't so good, I would have left you forever ago, from a servicing perspective. And what that initiated across the organization was, everybody talk to your customer. And they did exactly what you just said not to do, which was horrible, because the feedback was, stop asking me. I already told you once, fix the things, go fix this stuff. So
yes.
Absolutely. So, when you look at understanding, again, feedback is a gift, but sometimes that gift is heavy. There's a lot that just gets flown at you, and it's all great, but you've got to prioritize. You've got to figure out and pick, which of the items are you actually going to do, because you can't do everything for everyone. So how do you tackle the kind of the prioritization and getting aligned around that?
Well, what? One thing that I want to point out is that the friction, like it's usually in, I wouldn't say, how should I put it there? It's in the seams. I was going to say cracks, like no, it's in the seams, right? Like, and CX should be in the seams, right? Like, it's that connective tissue of the organization. And where I've seen it working the best is when you work on two levels, where you functionally have strategic proximity to the executive level, where you could advocate for issues, where you can bubble up what consumer is saying and get the buy-in on the initiatives that would address that. But also, you have to have that day-to-day partnership with the middle management, right? Because that's where it gets executed. Which reminds me of something that's happened pre-COVID, actually. At that time, I was working with this obscure little consultancy, and what was interesting is that the owner of the agency had developed a relationship with a CEO of RBC, Royal Bank of Canada, before he was a CEO. So he had this retainer with him where essentially everyone from exec suite had him on a speed dial. They could call him any time of the day, any time of the night, poke his brain about some issues, get some insights from him. And it was to do with like retail initiatives, with call center initiatives, and we were working on this one project where we worked with wealth management branch of RBC, and who was it? I wrote it down because I knew I was going to forget it. The CEO of that one at the time was Damon Williams. So we worked out with him this new engagement strategy, a new approach for the retail space, which got a green light. We got the budget, we got the go-ahead, we got endorsement from CEO. We developed that system for him essentially, and then we walk away because we are consultants. We don't really engage. And 3 months later, my boss gets that middle of the night call when he goes and says, "Listen, nothing's happening, right? Like it came to a screeching halt." Right? This initiative is not going through. Like, can you just dig through the organization, figure out what is going on? So we went from function to function, that we're involved, and we zeroed in on this one senior brand manager who was in charge of actually, bringing that to life, and she was basically saying no. Right? And to me, it was a shock. Cultural shock too, because where I'm from, you don't say no to management, you don't say no to your CEO, you say yes sir, and then you fall in line. But she says it's too blue sky. I don't get it. I don't see the value. I'm not going to waste my time on that. What we've done then, we connected her with all of the related stakeholders that gave her perspective of how they should be pulled in, right? It's not just about you. We get that tie-in from, the outcomes that we want to accomplish to her own specific OKRs, and that kind of made it click for her, this is why we're doing what we're doing, and then paired that with some tangible steps for her to go through, which illustrates a point that you don't just get things approved on the upper management level. You have to go into the trenches. You have to be that connective tissue that pulls all of the resources, all of the departments together, and channels that towards the end cause.
Yeah, absolutely. That's crazy because you're right. That's abnormal, but you got to look for those areas of risk as well in the organization. And often talking to to companies about that is who are the people that when you're trying to do something from a CX perspective, where are those potential bottlenecks? Where are those risk points that require addressing way up front and get them involved early as well, for sure. So, again, when we think about, I want to come back to kind of closed loop.
Yeah.
Because again, you get feedback, you fix that, sometimes very publicly, and you kind of assume customer's going to get it, right? Like, oh yeah, they're going to figure it out that we took their feedback, but you kind of told me no. You got to have a process around that, a very structured process. So talk about that a little bit more.
Absolutely. I personally, I'm a huge fan of frameworks, right? This is how you get that structured approach. And the framework here is signal, then decision, then action, and then communication. All right? So you start off by pulling in all the themes. You get to prioritize those themes based on their viability, profitability, how well is it going to scale. Then that's your signal, right? You take that signal and then you move to the next stage where you turn that into decisions. You take the theme, you turn it into the action-based statement. That statement then. Well, you have to pull it through. You have to get the owner. You have to have someone who would be in charge of that problem statements. You assign the timelines. You establish the outcomes. You tie that, like in my previous example, to OKRs, so it becomes tangible, right? And then you pull the decision through. So this is where you do your time box experiments, right? Like you measure your outcomes, you prioritize fixes or actions that you want to enable, and then you look at the measurable results. You look at the pull-through, which brings you to that last stage, and only then you engage in that last stage, communication, right? And that part is absolutely non-negotiable. You have to go back to your audience, specifically subset of audience that's identified the issue, you go back to them with that same framework you said, we did, and we are evaluating. Right? It doesn't just stop there because, as we know, VOC is iterative. Like you take that stab at that, you see the results, you communicate the results, and if there are no results to communicate, you tell them, yes, we did hear you, this is the action plan. We either deprioritize it based on X, Y, and Z, and this is the new timeline, or we did it in favor of another initiative that's, again, comes from your feedback. And this is how you close that loop.
Yeah, I know that in a lot of organizations, especially in a lot of contact centers specifically, it would be great to to actually call, right, and say, hey, I just want you to know we heard you, we took care of this, and now here's the result. But staffing is always an issue, so having enough staff to do that. But it does circle back around to, but what value does that end up having to them? Because if your objective, again, going from cost center to growth center is to, for instance, retention of customer, that close the loop creates so much more value that it's probably worth the extra bandwidth to make some of those outbound touches. And if nothing else, sending more automated messages can at least do some of that as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So as we think about there are a lot of leaders in this room, and you talked about CX is kind of it's the stitching between the seams, right? It's trying to bring all of that together across most organizations, and the contact center can be part of that as well. From that perspective. But when you look at the skills needed for a leader today to accomplish that effectively, I mean, where do you see the investment in leadership and future leaders around that space?
That's such a loaded topic.
We have all 30 minutes just on that one alone.
Oh my goodness. Honestly, I myself don't come from the traditional CX background. I never worked in a call center. I never done analytics, professionally. I know enough to be dangerous now, right? But for me, it was picking up those smaller skills, things like project management skills, right? Like ability to engage with organizations at different levels. Ability to go into that data analytics, make sense of it, understand what is it that you're trying to zoom in on. So when it comes to the leadership and what you should be looking for in your CX force, it should go beyond just call center, ability to follow the scripts, or crunching numbers. Like if we're talking analytics, it needs to be that's jack of all trades, right? Like, and that is an kind of unfavorable allegory here, but you need to have that flexibility to pivot and not just say like, oh, this is the insight, but also have the follow through to say, and this is how we're going to act on this insight. This is the timeline that we're going to hold ourselves accountable to. These are the parties that we're going to engage, right? And I do have connections with all of those, segments of your organization. So it's really that flexibility, that ability to pivot, learn a new skill, apply the new skill, and build it in that ecosystem of what you offer, because in CX, you're dealing with ambiguity, right? You don't know where the next problem is going to come through. It could be budgetary, right? Like it could be a compliance issue. It could be an organizational issue altogether where you need to pivot the entire organization and push it in the right direction, right? Which is, an overwhelming task if you start thinking about it. So you need to have that mental flexibility. You don't have to have all of those skills. It can be learned. I learned on the job, right? Like I'm not a certified project manager. I never went to school for business analytics, but I have all of those skills because I done it enough, because I was able to say, yes, I don't know how to do it now, but I'll go and I'll figure it out.
Yeah, I think one of the things too, and I'll echo that completely, is it takes time and experience within that as well. I mean, one of the things I benefited from that I didn't realize at the time over my 30-year career in this space was I moved laterally a ton. I obviously started in the contact center, as I've shared with this group, but I ran, analytics teams, quality teams, training teams. I ran technology teams, data teams. I was in marketing for a while, and the value of that is infinitely, important in today's day and age. Because if we want to drive CX, again, it takes everyone at the organization to create a great experience. We've got to have that experience, or that opportunity to learn through that. And it's also another way in an organization to get everybody back involved, because just like getting, as we talked a little earlier, bringing someone into the contact center, having them hear calls and experience what it is to be in customer service, taking someone from customer service and rotating them into other roles is extremely valuable as well. Not just the agents. I'm thinking leaders. And a lot of organizations systematically do that. They literally have programs that are rotations for future leaders and upcoming leaders to spend that time to learn those other pieces, and they're better off for it because it's a long game. That's the other piece to it. This is a long game that we have to understand. No matter how quick things are moving, we still have to foundationally build that. What would you add to that?
Well, you know what? That reminds me of a conversation I had on day one with someone from CXPA organization, right? So like they deal with, oh sorry, no, it's not the CXPA. My bad. So they run investment certification, investment credential certification organization, and they do have a small call center. They have a small CX team, and they just this year started thinking about, how do we retain them beyond, the point of this 2-year drop off. I don't remember who gave that stats from the stage, but that's the usual turnaround for the call center. So this year they started implementing this whole connect with them, where they go and ask what are their goals, what are their ambitions, where do they see themselves, so that they can start thinking how to incorporate that into their career path, so that they can proactively start thinking about where is this person going to be if they want to be with us. And that applies a lot to the younger generation, right? I wouldn't say that there is a sense of entitlement, but there is this hunger, I would say, with younger folks where they, in my generation, we were told to fold in line, you have to pay your dues. They say, screw that, I can do that, right? Just give me the opportunity and I will be great at that. So you have to take that feedback in. You have to be able to channel them where they see themselves, give them tools to arrive to that destination. And yeah, of course, you're going to have some that will be perfectly happy where they're at, right? Like they were telling me about that, lady who's been with them for 5 years, and that's her goal, that's her ambition. She wants to be stable. She knows what she's doing, and that's okay, right? But it's for those younger individuals where the mindset is progression, right?
Yeah.
This is a stepping stone. How we're going to get you to that next stage, that's where you need to take their feedback and structure their experience, their employee experience, accordingly.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're going to have some time for a couple of questions, so be thinking of that. I've got one more for you as we're kind of winding down a little bit. But credibility, especially VOC credibility. Mm-hmm. Let's talk a little bit about that. So as you think about closing the loop and things of that nature, for organizations that out there that haven't quite figured that out yet or haven't really engaged in that part of it yet, maybe what's the 30 to 90-day view of starting that process? Because really part of it is just getting started in a concept.
Well, the first step would be to give that flexibility to CX, embed them in all stages of the VOC cycle. They absolutely have to be at the interpret and improve stage, because if they're not, if all they do is act like this, like a newsletter, where they report on the dashboard, they provide some insights, and they wait, right, until something transpires, then what you end up getting is silos that are getting tightened up because there is no that connective tissue that moves and stretches them and connects them together. You're going to get the faith in VOC and its ability to change anything deteriorating from within the organization because there's nothing moving VOC cycle. There's no CX that is empowered enough to be able to push things through. You will have the ivory tower effect, right? Again, that's something that you have to think of because sometimes you know what customer wants, but that comes from like ivory tower mindset. You don't check in with the customer. You don't prioritize exactly what they need in this particular moment and what brings the most value to them at this specific moment in time. And as a result, you're going to start seeing that feedback loop that's not just deteriorates scores, like it erodes it even if there are no other stresses introduced, simply because the prevalent issue is not addressed and you keep asking, like you said, you keep asking that question without offering any solution.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So, time for some questions. Who's got a question for Vladis? We got an online. Let's start there and then be thinking about yours. But in organizations where CX does not directly own operations, what governance structures or decision rights have you seen successfully ensure that VOC insights actually influence priorities, funding, and frontline behavior, rather than becoming, just a report to the executives?
Well, you know what? I want to bring back and be that broken record, but there have to be two levels of engagement. You have to have the ear of the senior executive team, right? But at the same time, you have to have that like day-to-day relationship with people who are pulling it through, right? So having that dual structure where your CX team doesn't have to be huge, but it has to be, to our earlier point, versatile, so that they can wear project management hat if they have to. They have to be able to pull analytics and make a project out of that and push it along, interact with vendors, knowing what internal organizations can add to it and connect them together. So if you have that mindset, even with a smaller team, you can move the needle, guaranteed.
Yeah, I'd even add to that a little bit that says when you think about trying to make sure it rolls well up to executives, you also have to think about how and what are you measuring. I see a lot of contact centers that get caught in the trap of our focus is measuring the agent performance, which absolutely is your role. Individual agent performance or even group agent performance doesn't change the needle for the C-suite. That's where you have to make sure that as you're measuring and listening and understanding, it's at multi-levels. It's at the relationship level of the customer. It's at the journey level, usually via effort, about what are they trying to do across all the different channels. And then it's also at the transactional level.
And you need to know what is important to that specific C-suite that you are talking to. So I can't remember, again, who said that, but I remember someone saying that they have dashboards that are specific to finance, like, to a CFO, to your PMO, because their goal is going to be different, but it's the same metric pulled in and structured in a way that pulls in value for them specifically. And obviously, don't overwhelm them. Like I've seen those dashboards where it's like, like digits, numbers, graphs, bar charts, and you can't make sense of that, right? We have those dashboards. So what I transitioned to, like I have 3 metrics. Like I mentioned, I have NPS, I have CES, and I have CSAT, measuring different aspects of engagement. Yep. Everything else is complementary. We have qualitative, we have sentiment analysis, but all of that is in service of all those 3 metrics. And that makes the message very clear, like exactly what those metrics are for. They're easy to remember, they're easy to quote, and when you take an action and it changes, that makes it so much more powerful.
Yeah, and I think the follow-up to that is, as well, is to then you've got to take those same metrics and measure the impact to those other things that are important. So being able to say, what is revenue to customers who, from maybe a net promoter perspective, were promoters, detractors, or deep detractors. What is that? 6 months, 12 months later. Take that longer view of it, because again, if you can point to say, hey, detractors are 5 times more likely to not be loyal, which is a stat I've been able to reconcile, and in fact, these days I'm seeing it 13 times more likely to be disloyal if something's hard to do in a CES perspective. That gives you that prediction, and it connects to the business,
Absolutely.
to their needs.
And I'm so glad that you mentioned that, because it needs to be translated into the language that's that specific exec suite, that CFO, for example, they have their specific metrics. NPS means nothing to them. So you have to translate that into, and this is how it pulls in on revenue. This is how it pulls in on your specific objectives and key results that you are aiming to achieve. So, you have to speak their language. You have to translate that in a language that they can understand as well.
Absolutely. So questions. Sorry, we even got on a sidetrack here. So questions for Vladislav. All right. Thank you very much. Give me a round of applause. So pulling on that thread just a little bit more as we think about it, it's not for the business to come to the contact center and figure out what they can get from you. That's the one very important truth. It's for us to figure out what they need and take the message to them. And so that's part of that being the connective tissue across the organization from a CX perspective, because we have to be bringing them in. And that, unfortunately, ends up being sometimes a full-time job when many of us already have full-time jobs, right? But that's where the more mature organization starts to translate action, and Vladis had some great stories there about ways to do that from a structured perspective, similar to what I talked about in closing yesterday.